wage a relentless war to the last drop of blood against anyone who dares to attack our states.
Have you ever witnessed a nation declare war on impossibility itself? Burkina Faso, one of the world's poorest countries with a GDP of barely $20 billion, stood before the world and whispered a number that echoed like thunder: $200 billion. Not a figure in theory, not a distant dream, but a living project already roaring to life across its plains and savannas. What kind of country dares to dream 10 times beyond its means? And who leads such a nation with enough certainty to make the world's superpowers, China and the United States, pause and turn their heads? This is not a fantasy. This is Faso Mebo A. It began without fireworks. No headlines on Western media, no parades, no IMF banners waving in the wind. Just a single, almost unnoticed government release. A whisper carried by scattered local reports. And then, without warning, the ground trembled. Across the dry lands of Burkina Faso, hundreds of heavy machines rolled out in formation. Bulldozers flattening ancient trails, graders slicing through savannas where roads had never been imagined. In the Sahel, in the center-south, in the most forgotten corners of the map, entire villages paused their daily rhythm to witness a sight their grandparents never dared dream of: the arrival of the modern road. What was this movement? A stunt? A temporary rush of nationalism? Or was this the moment Africa stopped asking for permission to build its future? And then came the figure no one could ignore: $200 billion. Announced by President Ibrahim Traoré's administration, this wasn't an empty declaration. It was a bold commitment under the newly born Faso Mebo A initiative, a national plan to rebuild the entire road network of Burkina Faso. Think of it: a country with a GDP of $20 billion committing to a project 10 times its size. The world's economic logic could not comprehend it. But was it ever about logic, or was it about courage? And when the first aerial drone footage emerged showing rows of road rollers advancing like an army clearing paths through untouched lands, the question shifted from why to how. And then something stranger still. These machines weren't operated by foreign contractors. They weren't leased from Western companies. They were owned by the people of Burkina Faso, operated by young engineers and workers trained not in distant capitals, but on their own soil. A generation once destined to emigrate was now building the highways of their homeland. And for the first time in decades, this wasn't a project driven by World Bank plans or IMF conditions. No Western logos, no foreign consultants speaking in air-conditioned rooms. This was Burkina Faso, owned, Burkina Faso led. But why now? Why would a fragile nation under siege from insurgents, burdened by economic sanctions and isolated from traditional aid channels, choose this moment to take on its boldest project? Yet, could it be that after decades of waiting for salvation from abroad, they finally decided to save themselves? Perhaps it is time to ask, when a people stops waiting for permission, what happens next? And when a nation builds for itself, who can stop its momentum? And here's a question for you: if your country faced the same crossroads, would you wait for the world's approval or start laying the road to your own future? Leave your thoughts below. But what fuels such a sudden awakening? Where does a nation find the muscle, the machinery, and the men to move mountains overnight, just weeks after the quiet announcement over 900 heavy-duty machines, graders, bulldozers, excavators, arrived not as rentals but as assets owned by the state? They didn't carry European flags. They weren't operated by foreign crews flown in for photo ops. These were manned by Burkinabé youth, some of whom had never seen a construction vehicle before. Now they were the ones driving them. What do you call it when a generation once forgotten by their leaders suddenly becomes the force rebuilding their nation? Is it employment? Is it training? Or is it a silent revolution? Drone footage captured it all. Long steel-clad convoys slicing through the savannah like rivers of iron. Paths that were once hunting trails are now arteries of commerce and connection. For many remote villages, it was the first time in history they witnessed tarmac. But let's not be naive. This was not chaos. It wasn't a spontaneous grassroots movement, nor an uncoordinated burst of patriotism. It was precise, military in its organization, relentless in its pace. Why? Because Fasomebo A was not born from the ministries. It was not left to the slow-turning wheels of bureaucracy. President Traoré understood in times of war development cannot wait for debate. So he built the entire project on a wartime framework, command precision zone-based targets, and zero tolerance for delay. Does leadership mean waiting for paperwork to clear or clearing the obstacles yourself? Each province from the hostile Sahel to the peaceful Cascades was given exact quotas. Each district had its own targets. Every road crew had a deadline, and reports flowed not on paper, but through GPS trackers, drone surveillance, and instant communication chains. This was not the Africa the world expected. This was not an Africa waiting for foreign feasibility studies, endless audits, or 5-year pilot projects. This was action-first governance moving at the speed of national survival, and even China, the quiet technical consultant in the shadows, watched in surprise. Veteran Chinese engineers who had built highways across Asia reportedly remarked, "We have seen big projects before, but we have never seen a nation build at this pace with this level of self-control." But the world kept asking, where was the money coming from? Where was the oversight? And who was really in charge? Insiders point to months, perhaps years of silent preparation. Gold revenues quietly stockpiled, tax reforms passed without fanfare, strategic partnerships negotiated far from the glare of international media. They built the engine before anyone saw the race begin. And as the roads stretched further, another truth became clear. This wasn't just a transportation project. It was a national operating system rebuilding the entire logic of the state. But now a bigger question emerged. Are these roads simply paths to markets, or are they the first steps toward reclaiming a lost destiny? What do you think these roads are leading to? A stronger economy or a freer people? Let us know below. But what is a road really? Is it merely asphalt laid over dust and stone? Or is it something deeper, a declaration of belonging, a bridge to reclaim what was lost, the very name, Fasomebo A carries a meaning few outsiders understand. Roughly translated through local dialects, it means the road to ourselves. Not just a highway to the capital, not just a route to trade, but a symbolic path to sovereignty, to memory, to dignity. For decades, African infrastructure projects carried someone else's name. World Bank corridors, IMF development zones, French-financed highways leading to mines that no longer served the people. But Fasomebo was different. No foreign blueprints, no donor stamps, no ceremonial ribbon cuttings for cameras abroad. So ask yourself, what changes in a nation when it builds? Not for the headlines, but for its children's footsteps. What happens when the first brick is laid? Not to impress Paris, but to unite Kayagawa and Bobo Dioulasso. This wasn't infrastructure for export markets. It was a national nervous system connecting farmers to schools, doctors to villages, and security forces to frontiers abandoned for too long. Every province was given a purpose, and every purpose was tied to a road. If a village lacked a school, it earned a connection. If a region fed the nation, it earned a highway. If a district protected the borders, it earned reinforcement. This wasn't random development, it was deliberate alignment where physical roads matched economic and social goals. But why now? Why abandon the slow donor models of the past? Because Burkina Faso could no longer afford the luxury of waiting. In the old world, road projects came in 5-year election cycles delayed by bureaucracy and foreign conditions. But Fasomebo is built on a 25-year vision, far beyond election headlines, far beyond the lifespan of a single administration. Can you imagine a government planning not for applause today, but for permanence tomorrow? This is not a pilot project. This is not a feasibility study. This is survival turned into strategy. And quietly, the strategy is working. Every month, kilometers of tarmac stretch across the horizon. Every district that once felt forgotten is now a line on the national roadmap no longer invisible. But still skeptics ask, can such a bold initiative survive insurgencies, economic pressure, and international skepticism? Or will the weight of ambition collapse under its own speed? Perhaps the real question is simpler. When a people find their own path home, who dares block the road? And you? If your country had lost its way, what road would you build first to find yourselves again? Leave your answer below. What happens when a nation, long trapped by dirt roads and isolation, suddenly opens its veins to movement? What do you call it when a sack of onions that once rotted in a village now reaches the city in a single day? Is it trade or is it freedom? Across Burkina Faso, the new roads are not just lines on a map. They are arteries of a living organism pumping life, energy, and connection where stagnation once ruled. Villages once cut off for weeks during the rainy season are now linked by asphalt that doesn't wash away. Farmers who used to sell their crops for pennies in local markets can now transport them hundreds of kilometers, multiplying their income overnight. But the transformation is not only economic, it's social, it's human. Roadside economies have sprung up like shoots after the first rain. Food stalls, motorcycle repair shops, fuel kiosks, and small markets now line the once empty roads. In places where nightfall meant silence and darkness, light bulbs now shine from solar hubs installed alongside the highways. And who benefits first? The women who dominate local trade, now able to transport, sell, and restock faster than ever before. The young people who once wandered without work, now trained as machine operators, surveyors, project managers, paid, respected, needed. Can a simple stretch of road turn hopelessness into enterprise? Can an asphalt line redraw the destiny of a generation? The evidence says yes. In the past, transportation costs consumed up to half the price of goods in rural Burkina Faso. A sack of millet worth 5,000 CFA in Ouagadougou would cost nearly as much to transport over broken bridges and muddy trails. Farmers were forced to sell locally for peanuts or let their harvest rot. Today, those roads are cutting transport costs by 30%, 40%, sometimes more. Markets are opening daily instead of twice a week. Mobile money transactions have doubled in newly connected zones. Supply chains that once collapsed during the rainy season now run uninterrupted. But is this only about trade or is it about dignity? Because when a mother can take her child to a clinic without fearing the road, is that not progress? When a teacher accepts a rural post knowing he can reach the city in an hour, is that not national unity? And the change doesn't stop at the countryside. Secondary towns, once drained by migration to the capital, are now attracting skilled workers back. Electricians, masons, and small business owners are relocating to where demand is rising. Burkina Faso, long seen as a collection of isolated fragments, is becoming a single economic organism connected by its own will. But what happens when goods, ideas, and people start to flow freely? Who controls the direction of that flow, and will those who once benefited from this connection try to stop it? If your village was once forgotten and now the road has arrived, what will you build first? Share your answer in the comments below. But what happens when a road becomes more than a road? What happens when it carries not just farmers and merchants, but soldiers and security? Can a highway protect a nation as much as it connects it? In Burkina Faso, the answer is unfolding in real time. For years, insurgents and armed militants ruled the spaces where the government could not reach. Broken trails, dense forests, and weather-ravaged paths gave them an unbeatable advantage: isolation. But isolation is no longer their ally. Now fresh asphalt slices through territories once considered unreachable. What used to take soldiers 4 hours over treacherous ground now takes 40 minutes by highway. Speed has become the new weapon. Reach has become the new defense. Ask yourself, if a state can arrive faster than the threat, who holds the power? In the northern Sahel and eastern zones, where foreign-trained militants once vanished without a trace, security forces are setting up permanent outposts because the roads allow them to. And it's not just the army. Mobile clinics, food convoys, and teaching supplies now flow alongside the troop transports. In places where government presence was once a myth, it is now a daily reality. But why is this important? Because in war zones, presence is power. And these roads are the visible proof that the state has not abandoned its people. Villages once forced to negotiate with armed groups for movement, trade, or even water are now faced with a choice: Stand with the militants of the past or with the roads of the future, and increasingly they are choosing the state. But is this a simple military strategy? No. This is psychological warfare at its most human. The sight of bulldozers, engineers, and graders marching ahead of the soldiers sends a message no speech could deliver. We are here to build, not just to fight. In areas long forgotten, where governance once came only in the form of NGO tents or UN food trucks, the state is now arriving with its own trucks, its own clinics, its own teachers. But let's not be naive. The battle is not over. Night attacks on convoys, sabotage of isolated equipment sites, these threats remain. But the Traoré administration expected this. That's why mobile defense units, part engineer, part infantry, are embedded within the road crews. They are not just building the arteries of the nation. They are defending them brick by brick, kilometer by kilometer. And so the road becomes both shield and sword, a path for commerce and a line of defense. But this raises a deeper question. Is Burkina Faso becoming a model of stability or a target of its own ambition? When a nation dares to claim its land so boldly, how long before outside forces try to redraw its map? If your homeland was under threat, would you build walls to keep the danger out or roads to carry your courage forward? Tell us what you would do below. But no revolution remains isolated forever. When a nation dares to act outside the script, how long before others start listening or fearing? Burkina Faso's roads are no longer just a national project. They are a ripple across West Africa, shaking assumptions from Mali to Ghana, from Niger to Togo. Neighboring leaders, some skeptical, some inspired, are now sending quiet envoys to study the model. Why? Because here is a government under sanctions fighting insurgencies and cut off from traditional donors, and yet executing a $200 billion project with military precision and undeniable results. That doesn't just defy expectations, it redefines the possible. But not everyone is celebrating. In Brussels and Washington, in Paris and New York, the silence is deafening. Where are the headlines praising African ingenuity? Where are the op-eds marveling at sovereign success? They are absent, because what Traoré is building threatens more than just economic interests. It threatens the control of the narrative. For decades, African development was a stage play written elsewhere, budgets drafted in Washington, policies approved in Paris, and projects launched only with the IMF's blessing. But Fasomebo ignores all of it. It is a self-funded, self-led, and self-defended movement. So ask yourself, when an African country succeeds without asking permission, is it applauded or isolated? Already whispers are circulating through Sahelian capitals. Talk of a regional infrastructure pact where Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso could pool resources, co-manage construction fleets, and coordinate defense corridors. A Sahel transport and security bloc without NATO oversight, without French intervention. What would happen if Africa no longer asked for loans to build its highways? What if they pooled their gold, their oil, and their human capital and built it themselves? This is the quiet fear spreading through Western institutions. Because Burkina Faso isn't failing without them, it's thriving without them. But with success comes risk. Multiple intelligence leaks already suggest efforts to destabilize the logistics chain, economic pressure, political interference, or the co-opting of key officials. Even inside Burkina Faso, the danger of overreach looms. Mobilizing $200 billion, no matter how carefully planned, is fraught with bottlenecks, shortages, and potential mismanagement. What happens if inflation spikes? What happens if workers go unpaid? Will the same people who now cheer on the roads turn against them in frustration? But Traoré's answer is not speeches, it's momentum. Mistakes are corrected swiftly, corruption punished quietly, and every delay chased by an army of builders. Because in this model, there is no room for pause. The only way to survive is to keep moving forward. And so the roads stretch further, carrying not just trade and troops, but an idea too powerful to contain Africa for the first time in decades, deciding its own direction. But the world is watching. Will they welcome this awakening or work to silence it? If your continent finally stood on its own feet, Would you join hands to strengthen it or turn away in fear of its power? Share your thoughts below. But how long can a nation run without rest? How long can momentum alone keep the walls from closing in? Burkina Faso today stands at the crossroads of its greatest promise and its greatest peril. Each new kilometer of road brings opportunity but also makes it a bigger target. Not from the insurgents alone, but from a world uncomfortable with a country rewriting the rules of its survival. Because what happens when a small sanctioned war-torn nation succeeds where the developed world said it would fail, it embarrasses them. It proves that aid dependency was never destiny, it was a choice forced upon them. Already financial institutions are reacting. Credit downgrades despite no defaults. Investment freezes despite rising productivity. Educational grants withdrawn accusing Burkina Faso's schools of not meeting global standards. But ask yourself who sets these standards, and in whose interest the real battle is no longer fought on dusty roads. It is fought in quiet boardrooms in Paris, Brussels, and Washington, through financial warfare, not bullets, through isolation, not invasion. But in the face of this silent siege, something unexpected is happening. Teachers, farmers, engineers, and students are refusing to wait for salvation. Universities are launching self-funded programs. Villages are building community schools without state budgets. Farmers are creating cooperatives to feed their own regions. And the most powerful weapon of all, faith. Faith that the nation belongs to its people, not to foreign creditors. Faith that what they build together cannot be taken by sanctions. But let's be honest, momentum is fragile. A single misstep, a missed payment, a corrupt official, an exhausted workforce could unravel it all. So the question is not whether Burkina Faso can dream big, it already has. The question is whether it can endure. Because the world is watching every mile of this project not with admiration, but with calculation. Waiting for the first crack, the first stumble, the first collapse. Waiting to say, "We told you so." And yet the roads stretch on. Each one a defiant answer to doubt. Each meter paved not just with asphalt, but with the quiet, stubborn belief that Africa does not need permission to build itself. But in the end, this story is not just about a country. It's about a question that echoes far beyond its borders. When your people are tired of waiting for the world to change, will you build the road yourself? When the obstacles rise higher than your resources, will you stop, or will you start walking anyway? And if you were Traoré standing in the eye of the storm, would you slow down to negotiate or keep running until the horizon breaks open? Now we ask you, what would you choose to pass on to the next generation? Faith, courage, or the will to act without permission? Leave your answer in the comments, and may your road, wherever it leads, be one you build with your own hands.